Okie dokie. Well, here's the F1 and the R11s, and I can, as I promised in my blog, discuss a few of the points that I thought were perhaps better demonstrated than just typed about. But I guess the first thing I'd like to do is just talk about the one thing that the R11s got better, and that is down here on the navigation buttons. We've got the home button in the center, we've got the back button over there, and we've got the most recently used apps over there. So that's helpful, but it's also configurable because they're soft buttons, so you can fortunately move them to different places. I personally prefer them around the other way, so that this is the back, this is the home, and that's the most recently used apps. And that's actually a really good little system, as well as you can remove them completely and have them being swipe up gestures to do the same thing. Great. The F1, on the other hand, no, it's a little bit different. You've got the home button as you expect, you've got the back button as you expect, but this button here is not what you expect. It's only most recently used apps. If you long press it, then it's most recently used apps. So if we pick the app that we want to go into, and well, let's pick one. Let's go into here. So that's my file explorer. If I press that button singularly, I get the menu. So back in the old days of probably ice cream sandwich and maybe even gingerbread, sometimes the menus were this three horizontal lines, and that's what that's meant to represent, this nesting of menus, which is sort of handy, but it's a bit superfluous because generally speaking you can just swipe to one side and get it anyway. So, you know, I don't really care too much about that. However, what it does do that's bloody annoying is in the home screen, it activates the way of changing and deleting things. So here I can press that little X and delete the widget, or I can, you know, tap one of the apps and delete the app, which is bloody annoying, to be honest with you. So that's a step forwards, and that's, to my mind, the only really good step forwards that the R11s has made. The dual camera is nice, and the dual camera does a really good job in low light, despite the fact that GSM Arena aren't quite aware of how to understand that. But anyway, pretty much everything else shows a lack of continuity in terms of the development. So it's all about almost like a new team that never spoke to the old team came in and developed a new OS, and threads of continuity vanished. So yes, of course, we're all used to swiping things, and that's pretty much the normal way of doing things. But let's swipe down here and swipe down here, and that's the normal notification menu, and it's also quite common to have the configuration shortcuts here. But over here, they decided not to do that. That's, you know, a call that they made. Maybe they decided that there wasn't enough room for the millions of notifications you get from all your incredible fans. But you get to the configuration shortcuts here. Now, instead of having 15 of them available here, you've only got those 5, and you can sweep to get the extra ones, which, you know, I don't like, but again, it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. But things that are lacking in consistency and outright just, you know, failing to remain in the picture are things like both give down here the usage stats for your monthly data. If I long press this one, it takes me to my data monitor, and I can see a very nice presentation of how much I've used so far this month. And there's a small blue segment, because I haven't used much today, representing the 314 meg that I've used today. I can also just tap straight there and get into all of the usage statistics by app if I was so interested. Unfortunately, on the R11s, that doesn't do a goddamn thing. So if you want to find out what your data usage is, you've essentially got to go into, you've got to go into your settings and dig through that until you can find the right thing. That's a step backwards. Now, another example of step backwards is that everyone who's had much to do with Color OS knows that you can't replace your dialer with a different dialer or your messages with different messages. That's okay. And we don't have an app drawer, and we can just move stuff around and have as many screens as is needed to represent the icons that you've got. But I can move those icons around. Like, for example, I can decide, okay, I want to put that one over here. Great. Done. This one is actually just ordered itself, and you can't really change things around. If you wanted to put that one down there by itself, you can't do that. It's got to be in that grid. So the most you can do is rearrange where something is in the grid, but you can't actually put it exactly on the screen where you want it. I kind of find that to be a little bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. The same lack of continuity goes in through the image browser as well. So if I go into my standard image browser and then go into the image browser here, I've got photos that were taken today, yesterday, day before, other dates, or I've got all albums. So I can just swipe across and look at every album I've got. Here, I've got to actually press all albums to look at every album I've got. I can't swipe. That's a bit of a backward step, considering more or less it's the same application. So I don't understand why they did that. Again, it's just one of the many examples that I could give of there being a lack of continuity in the development between the two. It's not like a step forwards, it's a step backwards in so many other ways. I don't mind getting a better camera and a better screen, but why should I have to give up some of the other features that I actually quite like? Speaking of which, how many times have you called somebody to find that they don't answer their phone, and then 2 days later they say, oh look, I'm sorry, I missed the calls, I had my phone on silent? Well, rather than changing the ringtone, what you can do is you can go into the quiet time and just set what it's going to do, and I can say, okay, I want you to be quiet for the next hour, and then it will count down, and you can see 59 minutes, 53 seconds, 52 seconds, and away it goes. So it will remain quiet with the little moon icon there to indicate that you're in quiet time. That's great. So over here, if I go into the new one, I can only enable it manually. So if I enable it manually, great, quiet time is enabled. But then I've got to remember to unenable it when I'm finished, or it just stays quiet until the cows come home. Now, that's no better than just putting it into silent mode. I mean, so they've really munged up the usefulness of quiet time. Now, I don't really care if most people were not very thoughtful and most people are like too shallow maybe to dig through all of the settings of their phone and figure out what it can do. And I know that when the F1 first came out, many people complained that a lot of the apps that they liked weren't there, such as Battery Manager and things like that. But Oppo came with its own, so you didn't really need to go and download that. Myself, having come from the Nokia, I can assure you that I'm actually quite fond of a phone coming configured with lots of stuff on it. Like this came with document readers, OCR, all sorts of stuff. It's a really good little package. So, you know, lots of things have become, you know, dumber. For example, my world clock, I've got the option of seeing my local date time on a nice clock, or on a digital clock if I prefer. But if I go into this system, it's not there. There's only the world times that I've chosen. Here I can swipe between the screens. Here I can't. I have to actually press timer or stopwatch or world clock. Timer, stopwatch, world clock. You know, it's a backward step. Again, swiping gestures gone. I don't know why they chose to do that. It's kind of stupid. I don't get it. Next, I'd like to say that despite what people might think, while OLEDs are brighter, when you're actually outside in full sunlight, this light theme is actually a lot easier to see than the R11s's theme. So if I open up, whoops, the wrong one. If I open up the compass, I can't see that outside. I had to go and hide under a tree to be able to see what it was showing, because the dark theme may save some battery, but unfortunately it's not easy to see. So, you know, there's that. If they're going to offer themes, it would be nice if they made these themes configurable. Now, the next and probably the last thing I'll talk about is the screens. Yes, this screen looks probably a little bit washed out on the video. Let me see if that makes it look a bit better. Hard to be sure. But looking at it with my eye, I can say that the color profile of this is very, very close to almost every other LCD sRGB display I've ever used, whether it be my laptop, whether it be one of my other tablets. I've got 3 of those. My friends' laptops, my friends' tablets, or the Macintoshes at work. This display is actually very, very punchy and saturated, and that's great. So when you take a photograph with your camera, it looks punchy and saturated. But it's no good if you're trying to edit that picture, because when you send it to somebody else, it's going to look flat and less punchy and less color saturated, because they don't have the same display. So, okay, sure. It helps you to have a better experience of your pictures, and you can pretend that your picture looks good because you're seeing it on your screen. And when you send it off to your friends via Snapchat and you've done something with the colors or whatever, they'll get a totally different experience of your picture because their screens are just that much different. So the tendency towards black on my wife's jumper there is actually significantly different between the two. There I can actually see some colors and texture in her jacket, but here I really can't. And so if I was editing an image as loading it in my raw editor like Snapseed and then working out the saturation levels, I would make it an image that looks flatter on this machine than I would on this, because this makes it look artificially punchy, and then when I send it to somebody else, then they don't get to see that. Now that might be all well and good, but it's not ideal in my mind. So there's my major issues, and yeah, hope this helped you.